We are diving deeper and deeper and deeper. Today, I'm getting you a top 30 video. Hell, next week, we're probably going to go top 36, top 40, but just thank you so much for all the support. We are about to pass 81,000 subscribers on this channel, and if we hit 90,000 before the season starts, I'm going to get a 24-hour live stream draft freaking marathon underway. So if you have not done so already, go down there, subscribe. If you're already subscribed, drop that like next to the subscribe button. That way we get recommended to someone new. And lastly, because I genuinely appreciate all the support y'all have given us, I'm going to respond to as many comments as I can today. I can guarantee you I'm responding to at least 200 comments today. Minimum 200 comments on this video I'll get to. So if you have any questions, leave them down below. I don't want to waste your time. Let's dive into it. Tier 1. Jefferson, Kupp, and Chase. Now here, I understand we're leaving one wide receiver off that we'll get to in just 1 second. But with a Justin Jefferson, I think he can be the wide receiver 1 if you look at the transition over to Kevin O'Connell, if we're going to assume that this is a more pass-happy Minnesota Vikings team overall. And of course, he looks like he's on a path to potentially be one of the best wide receivers of all time with what we've seen through the first 2 years. Kupp at 2. We had Kupp at 1 a while ago, but with the Matthew Stafford elbow injury, as well as just how exciting that Minnesota Vikings passing offense may end up being, let's move Cooper Kupp at 2. I'm not going to fault anybody for drafting Cooper Kupp over Justin Jefferson, though. And then at 3, we are going to have Jamar Chase. Yes, I do think that Jamar Chase, despite not necessarily being a target hog last year, I think he can be the wide receiver 1 in fantasy this upcoming season, because I'm going to be expecting that the most efficient passing offense in the NFL last year from an adjusted yards per pass attempt standpoint in the Cincinnati Bengals, I expect that they push the pace of play with the improved offensive line now that Zach Taylor doesn't have to go out there and protect Joe Burrow every chance he gets. So love these players as potential shots to be the wide receiver 1 overall. And then someone else that I think could be the wide receiver 1 overall, but I did move him down to the second tier, it's going to be Stefon Diggs. Stefon Diggs leading us off here at 4. The reason I decided to drop Stefon Diggs into tier 2 is because, just based on all the questions y'all have given me in the comment section, it sounds like in a lot of casual drafts this year, you're actually able to take Stefon Diggs in the second round, which, dear God, if you're able to get Stefon Diggs in the second round of your draft, you better be excited about that. I truly think that he also has the upside to be the wide receiver 1 overall, if you don't assume that someone that we'll talk about later on in this video, in a Gabriel Davis, takes that massive step forward. Because obviously there are so many targets available in Buffalo with the departure of both Emmanuel Sanders as well as Cole Beasley. I like Josh Allen. I like Stefon Diggs. We've had him tier 1 all offseason. The thing is, if we're looking at these casual drafts, if we rank him down here in tier 2, you can still probably get him at the beginning of your second round, and maybe you don't have to reach on him too much. Now, going over to our next wide receiver, I made a mistake in the video 2 days ago. We have Davante Adams here at 5. That last overall rankings video we posted, I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know if I just hadn't slept enough, but we had CeeDee Lamb before Davante Adams. We had him a tier before Adams. It was horrible. It's inexcusable. I'm going to correct that here. And that with Davante Adams, I am still concerned with the departure of elite quarterback play. And I guess, I mean, you could say that Aaron Rodgers is staying in Green Bay. Adams himself is the one departing that situation. He is going to go over to Derek Carr. I'm fine with Derek Carr, but he's no Aaron Rodgers. And not only are you getting that quarterback downgrade, which we can assume the efficiency goes down, but on top of this, instead of just locking in a 30% team target share because he's going up against freaking Allen Lazard and Robert Tonyan for targets, I think the overall market share for Davante Adams comes down as well when he's going to be competing with Hunter Renfrow as well as Darren Waller. I'm not the biggest Hunter Renfrow fan in the world, but to be completely honest, he is a lot better than Allen Lazard. Now let's move this down to our wide receiver 6, CeeDee Lamb. Like I said, I got too excited. I ranked him too high in the last video. I'll be the first person to admit that. But with Lamb, you could clearly see the upside case that you have, and that you're looking at an offense that could be potentially number 1 in pace of play, number 1 in passing rate over expectation. This is something that we talk about all the time and just fueling fantasy points. This is why you see those advanced drafters. This is why you see those expert drafters out there aggressively targeting CeeDee Lamb. Like if we go pull up Underdog Fantasy right now, Lamb has an ADP of pick 14, but I sometimes see CeeDee Lamb going at the end of the first on Underdog Fantasy. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, I've seen him go before Derrick Henry on Underdog, which is the craziest thing in the world. But if you want to go take advantage of that on Underdog Fantasy, I got great news for you. I worked my ass off this offseason to create this partnership with Underdog Fantasy, where if you want our 300-page draft guide, even if you've already drafted, it's going to be such a help for you. all you got to do is go make that $10 deposit on Underdog and use promo code FLOCK. With promo code FLOCK, you're going to get that draft guide. On top of that, you're going to get our rankings. You're going to get a 100% deposit match. So it's essentially free for you to try it out. And we do those live streams every single night on Underdog Fantasy where you can come out and draft with us on the stream. Take advantage of that. And then let's drop it down to our third tier here. We're going to have Deebo Samuel at 7. With Deebo, we did move him up above Mike Evans once we had the contract extension with Deebo Samuel. I mean, looking a lot better than what you had with like AJ Brown in Philadelphia, DK Metcalf in Seattle. And I think that is a very telling for the usage that we may come to expect for Deebo Samuel. Now, he's wide receiver 3 on a points per game basis last year. So I know a lot of people are probably wondering why he's not that high this season. Trey Lance will vulture rushing touchdowns. I mean, hell, he's just not going to have 8 rushing touchdowns again. That's going to be damn near impossible. And I'm also worried about Deebo Samuel and that maybe Trey Lance, because he has that scrambling ability, does not have to look for the low average depth of target players across the line of scrimmage. So I don't think it's going to be a great fit with Deebo Samuel. Next wide receiver, Mike Evans here at 8. I mean, with Mike Evans, if Chris Godwin misses the beginning of the season for any stretch of time, he could be the wide receiver 1 overall during that stretch. Like if you have Mike Evans in a Tom Brady offense with no Rob Gronkowski, with no Chris Godwin, even if it's just the beginning of the season, Mike Evans should start off to such a hot start in your casual, shallow fantasy football leagues. What you may be able to do is start Mike Evans through the first few weeks and then look to sell him high afterwards if all of a sudden he's like the wide receiver 2 through the first month of the season. Now let's drop us down another tier. Let's go over to our wide receiver 9 here. Tyreek Hill, obviously getting a massive downgrade at the quarterback position, moving on from Patrick Mahomes over to Tua Tagovailoa. But there's a big but on this. If you ask Tyreek Hill, he is now finally going to get to play with an accurate quarterback. He's finally going to get to play with the most accurate quarterback in the NFL. Who the hell gives a damn about arm strength? But all jokes aside, I mean, here, if you're looking at Tyreek Hill, should be a wide receiver that projects to be the wide receiver 1A for the Miami Dolphins, an elite level talent, a lot more talented than the other wide receivers directly above him here. But this situation is just going to be gross because y'all know I like my guy Waddle. We'll talk about him in a second. Keenan Allen at 10. Keenan Allen at 10 here is going to be primarily for full PPR formats. With Keenan Allen, 10 targets a game. I mean, the reception floor is going to be massive, obviously, as the ceiling because he's playing with Justin Herbert as well. Now, what I will say is, if you're playing in a non-PPR format, or even if you're playing in a half PPR league, you will have to move Keenan Allen below this point because the majority of his value will be coming off just the pure volume with the receptions. We know the touchdown rate is going to be lower for Keenan Allen when his average depth of target so low. But now our 11th wide receiver is going to be T. Higgins. With Higgins, hell, this is about where he finished last year with a healthy Jamar Chase. When Jamar Chase was a top 5 guy as a rookie, as I've already mentioned, I think that the Cincinnati Bengals could potentially look to push the pace of play with the improved offensive line. I think you just get a lot more plays per game. I think you can get a lot more points in Cincinnati this upcoming season. T. Higgins is an elite level talent in a very condensed offense. Now, wide receiver 12 here, last guy in this tier, we are going to have A.J. Brown. With A.J. Brown, probably one of the best wide receivers in the entire NFL, like from a talent perspective. I think you could make an argument that A.J. Brown's a borderline top 5 guy if we're looking at his market share numbers, as well as his 2.7 yards per route run through the first 3 years of his NFL career. That is legitimately historic. And yeah, he's going from one run heavy offense to another run heavy offense. So maybe you say the situation is equally as bad. I would say it's honestly kind of a little bit worse because here in Philadelphia, instead of going up against Nick Westbrook-Akeen for targets, you're going to instead have to go up against Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, 2 players that I think are superb talents at the position. But now let's drop it down to our next tier. Let's go over to DJ Moore, wide receiver 13. Baker Mayfield recently announced as the starting quarterback here in Carolina. And I do think that with DJ Moore at this point, this should be a wide receiver that gets that massive bump up with Baker Mayfield coming over. And that if you're looking at his market share numbers at such a young age, he is legitimately historic. And he's done it over the past 3 years as well. He's in line with guys like Mike Evans from what we've seen with their early career production. Cannot wait to see him with Baker Mayfield. It's crazy to say that this is potentially the best quarterback he's ever had, but his quarterbacks have had an adjusted yards per attempt at 6.05 through the first, 4 years of his NFL career. Baker Mayfield's hovering around 7%. So I don't think Baker's good, but I think he's better than what he's had. Now, moving down to 14, gross situation. Jalen Waddle. With Jalen Waddle, he is penciled in to be the wide receiver 2 in his offense, even though I will say, I think there's a chance he's the wide receiver 1, and he's not going to have great quarterback play. I'm not a big believer in Tua Tagovailoa. But what I will say is, from a raw talent perspective, if we look at how good of a rookie season that Jalen Waddle had, if we look at wide receivers that have had over 60 receiving yards their rookie seasons and as many targets per game as Jalen Waddle, he is in line with guys like AJ Green. He's in line with guys like Julio Jones historically. He was an elite level prospect. The Miami Dolphins paid the 13th overall selection and a future first round pick to go up and select him at 6. He's an elite level player. One of the most talented guys in the league. It's a gross situation. I don't know how Tua supports both these wide receivers, but at the end of the day, sometimes I'm just going to throw my hands in the air and say, let's bet on talent. Let's draft a freaking stud here. Now, our next guy, Michael Pittman, 15. We have moved Michael Pittman above Deontay Johnson. We'll get to that in 1 second. With Pittman, this is a wide receiver that last year was the wide receiver 28 on a points per game basis. Yes, you get a quarterback upgrade going from Carson Wentz to Matt Ryan. But if we're looking at Matt Ryan at this point of his career, not prime Matt Ryan, I don't know how big of an upgrade this actually is at quarterback. I definitely will say Matt Ryan's better than Carson Wentz. But I think it's a slight upgrade. I'm not expecting to see any drastic changes for what should be one of the run heaviest offenses in the NFL because hell, they have Jonathan Taylor. They also added in target competition here in Indianapolis this year with both Alec Pierce and hopefully a healthy Paris Campbell. Now, our next wide receiver will be the wide receiver 7 on a points per game basis. Just signed that contract extension. Coming off a fantastic year, Deontay Johnson at 16. Yes, like I said, he was a mid wide receiver 1 last year. There is some uncertainty with the quarterback change. Also, George Pickens is looking like a freaking stud. So I think based on the George Pickens breakout, it's enough to move Deontay Johnson down here behind Michael Pittman. But in reality, yes, I understand there's some uncertainty with the change from Ben Roethlisberger. I think this is close to Deontay Johnson's floor. Because I know a lot of people want to say, oh, the new quarterback's not going to just focus in on Deontay as Big Ben did. We don't know that. And also, if we look at how bad Ben Roethlisberger was from an adjusted yards per pass attempt standpoint, the only non-rookies he was better than last year, friggin' Sam Darnold, Jacoby Brissett, and Andy Dalton. There's an outside chance Kenny Pickett. There's an outside chance Trubisky's better than 39-year-old Ben Roethlisberger was. I still love drafting me some Deontay Johnson, but you're able to get him like the 5th round. So if you're using these rankings, you're still going to be drafting a ton of Deontay. Now, let's go down to our next tier. Leading off at 17, we are going to have Mike Williams. With Mike Williams, this is about where he finished last year, and I know everybody wants to go down and say, Mason, you clown, don't you know? The reason that Mike Williams fell back in the second part of the season was because an injury. He missed one game. And if we go through and look at the entirety of Mike Williams' entire NFL career, this is a wide receiver that had that 5-game stretch at the beginning of 2021 where he was the wide receiver 2 overall, only behind Cooper Kupp. He was dominant playing with the quarterback that could finally hit him downfield, but he was utilized in a different way. Instead of being that primary deep threat that we know of Mike Williams that can improve the efficiency of the Los Angeles Chargers by distracting those safeties and by creating space for Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen underneath. In the first 5 weeks, he was used as a prototypical Alpha X wide receiver with an average depth of target significantly lower than what we've seen from his NFL career. But in the final 11 weeks, he went back to what we've seen throughout his entire NFL career, which is still an extremely talented NFL wide receiver, but a role that has him as a deep threat option and not necessarily a target hog. So yes, I am going to have Mike Williams ranked slightly below consensus, even though I will say he has the elite level ceiling if they decide to use him as an Alpha X wide receiver, but I am going to have him a couple tiers below Keenan Allen. If it was a non-PPR format, hell, in that format, you can take Mike Williams over Keenan because the touchdown upside, but these are rankings for a PPR league. Now, moving down to our next 2 guys, we're going to have Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, 18 and 19. With Jeudy and Sutton, I thought that both of these players were overdrafted before the Tim Patrick injury because I thought that the Denver Broncos offense would be good, but there would be too many players at the table eating. I mean, too many slices of that pie to go around for any 1 to 2 guys to stand out from the rest. I was looking at a wide receiver room of Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton, Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler, all guys that I think are pretty damn talented. Also, we have 2 capable tight ends. We have 2 capable running backs. And I was thinking that this could be very similar to what we had with the Dallas Cowboys last year, where they're number 1 in points scored. But because it was split among so many different options, hell, you didn't have anybody standing out from the crowd. I think you are less worried about that with the removal of Tim Patrick from Denver. So now, y'all have seen me drafting some Jerry Jeudy. Y'all have seen me drafting some Courtland Sutton. I mean, the reason I'm going to be one of the very few people to rank Jeudy over Sutton is if we're going to go through, if we're going to look at the 11 games that they played together throughout their respective NFL careers, hell, Jerry Jeudy's dominated Courtland Sutton in those contests as the wide receiver 1. Now, our last guy in this tier is going to be Hollywood Brown, wide receiver 20. A ton of reasons to be excited about Hollywood. This should be the best quarterback play he's had of his career. Now, Lamar Jackson's a great quarterback, but from an arm talent perspective in supporting wide receivers, I do think that Kyler Murray's better. And on top of this, you have no DeAndre Hopkins for the first 6 weeks. So if we're just going to be looking at a casual fantasy football league where hopefully your league mates are going to be active in trades, you could potentially go through and look to sell high on Hollywood Brown after the first month of the season if we assume that he starts off just white hot with no DeAndre Hopkins on this team. But still, when Hopkins comes back, he should be respectable. That's why we'll have him as a mid wide receiver 2 here. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we're going to have Terry McLaurin at 21. With Terry McLaurin, I will say it. I know nobody likes the guy. And so funny that I'm now painted as the Carson Wentz truther. But I think Carson Wentz will be the best quarterback we've ever seen for Terry McLaurin. Crazy to say, I know, I get it, but he's had some of the worst quarterback play in the entire NFL, very similar to DJ Moore. I think that they are 2 very comparable wide receivers. Funny that Terry McLaurin drafted in 2019, I believe DJ Moore in 2018, so you'd assume that Terry McLaurin is younger than DJ Moore, but he stayed all 5 years at Ohio State. He was actually older than DJ Moore. And also, you have Jahan Dotson coming over. I think Jahan Dotson will be serious target competition, as well as hopefully a healthy Curtis Samuel. Logan Thomas just got activated off the PUP. You also have a couple capable running backs here. So I think the target share comes down for Terry McLaurin this season, but the efficiency should go up with Carson Wentz. Now, our next wide receiver, Chris Godwin, wide receiver 22. Someone that y'all know we've had on must draft list all offseason now. I haven't talked about him in a couple weeks because now it does look like people are willing to pay up and draft Chris Godwin at the beginning of the 5th round when we used to be able to take him at the middle portion of the 6th. So he's no longer one of the best values in football, but I still think that he's a fantastic guy to go out there and buy into, because if he was 100% healthy in a PPR format, I probably would prefer him over Mike Evans if we're just going to look at the target share and the trajectory of these 2 wide receivers, as you did have Mike Evans drafted way back in 2014. Now, our next wide receiver is going to be Michael Thomas at 23. Another guy, y'all know I've gone out and made a million videos this offseason. I haven't done it in about a month because people have fixed his ADP. But about Michael Thomas being my favorite draft pick in fantasy. At one point, he was my most drafted player over there on Underdog. I haven't drafted as much of him now that you have to take him in round 5 compared to us being able to used to get him at wide receiver 40. That used to happen. That was his ADP. That was his ADP, I know. But here with Michael Thomas, this should be a player that has a wide range of outcomes. And that's what I like targeting in the middle rounds. I want to try to find that next Cooper Kupp. And if I had to bet, if I had to put $1 on who the next Cooper Kupp would be, a wide receiver that comes from round 5, that breaks out as the wide receiver 1 in fantasy, out of all these round 5 options, Michael Thomas would probably be my bet. Remember, with Cooper Kupp, he also had that elite wide receiver 1 season before his breakout a few years prior. Now, wide receiver 24, we are going to have Allen Robinson. With Allen Robinson, there are 2 sides of this argument. Another guy with a very wide range of outcomes, which is why I'm willing to put him here as the top 24 guy, because I do think that he has a very high ceiling, but a serious red flag. I know we want to throw out last season. I know we want to look at it where he had to play with Justin Fields and Matt Nagy, and we want to say, oh my gosh, this doesn't count for a second. Let's look at his entire career and ignore 2021. But what I will say is, in that same exact situation that Darnell Mooney played in, same exact spot, Darnell Mooney dominated Allen Robinson, whether that's from a target share perspective, a yards per route run perspective, an air yards perspective, and yards per game. It doesn't matter what you look at. The second-year receiver in Darnell Mooney was significantly better in the same situation than Allen Robinson last season. Now, with that being said, this will be the best quarterback play he's ever seen. By far and away. He was drafted in 2014 as well. Crazy that's taken him this long to get an above average starter. Now, going down to our next tier, we're going to have someone that also will see the best quarterback play of his entire NFL career. We are going to have someone that I have been burned on over and over and over again with. Let's go with the Juju Smith-Schuster here. I mean, with Juju Smith-Schuster, I got to fill you in. If you are a new member of the flock, we've had this channel for a long time. And back in 2019, this was the year that Juju Smith-Schuster was drafted as a round 1 pick in redraft leagues. This was when you had Antonio Brown leaving for the time. I believe it was Las Vegas. And I was looking at Juju Smith-Schuster saying, if we look at the trajectory that he has had through the first 2 years of his NFL career, combined with his age, this is someone that could be the wide receiver 1 overall in fantasy. Of course, oh my gosh, he wasn't anything close. He was one of the biggest busts in fantasy that year. And then to double down on it, I came out the next season and I said, oh my gosh, all these clowns fading Juju Smith-Schuster, they're going to get burned. I mean, here, Ben Roethlisberger was hurt last year. Juju Smith-Schuster was hurt last year. Go buy the dip on Juju Smith-Schuster, the best value in fantasy. We got burned again. Fooled me once, shame on you. Fooled me twice. I don't even need to say it. So I'm always hesitant to go out there and advocate for someone to draft Juju Smith-Schuster. But in reality, he could be penciled in to be the wide receiver 1 for Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs. I still want to bet on this being a top 5 passing offense in the entire NFL. He is still an extremely young wide receiver. He was drafted at 20 years old. He started his rookie year at 20 years old in 2017. So we will have him here at wide receiver 25, especially think about what would happen if the 33-year-old Travis Kelce went down this season. Now, at 26, we are going to have DK Metcalf. With DK Metcalf, significantly more talented than a lot of the players right before him here. Way more talented. But at the end of the day, we know DK Metcalf is a deep threat wide receiver. What do deep threat wide receivers need? They need time to get downfield. What do you need to get time downfield? You need a good offensive line. We're starting to put these pieces together. Now, what would you say if I told you PFF currently has the Seattle Seahawks graded out to be the worst offensive line in the NFL? Well, that's going to be hard for DK Metcalf to get downfield if the quarterback back there has no time. But what if that quarterback is an extremely accurate deep ball passer? Maybe that could cancel out. No, that's not the case. He's dealing with Geno Smith at quarterback, maybe Drew Lock. Looks like you do not have Jimmy Garoppolo coming over to Seattle. It would have happened by now if it was. So I think we do have to move DK Metcalf down here to wide receiver 26. It's crazy to put someone who had a 26% team target share last year, though, outside the top 24. Now our next wide receiver, Darnell Mooney, wide receiver 27. He dominated Allen Robinson last year, so I know it's so hypocritical for me to move him down here to wide receiver 27. I get it. And honestly, looking at this ranking, I agree with everybody going down there to the comment section saying, Mason, this is trash. Darnell Mooney needs to be way above this. I agree with you. I think Darnell Mooney has a significantly higher floor than a lot of other wide receivers in this range. I am just not a big believer in the Chicago Bears offense all around. I think that this is a team that's going to be a very slow offense with their pace of play. I think this is not going to be efficient quarterback play. I think it's going to be a very bad offensive line. I don't believe in this coaching staff. I think it's still a bad situation across the board. So even if Darnell Mooney has, say, a very high floor, I think that the ceiling is going to be capped. Very similar to a wide receiver we're about to talk about, but not this guy. Wide receiver 28, we're going to have Gabriel Davis. Now, if Gabriel Davis was being drafted around this range in fantasy drafts, trust me, I would be able to come out here and I'd be able to say, oh, Gabriel Davis, a wide receiver with an elite level ceiling. Look at all the targets available in Buffalo. Look at the quarterback play that he's going to have. Look at the role that he's stepping into. And I would love to make some hype videos about Gabriel Davis. Now, the issue is, right now in Underdog, Gabriel Davis goes in the middle of the 4th round. Gabriel Davis is drafted before guys like Deontay Johnson. So because of that, I haven't drafted a lot of Gabriel Davis, but I'll be the first person to admit that he has wide receiver 1 upside. Based on the amount of passing yards, passing touchdowns that should be in this Buffalo Bills offense, I think that with Gabriel Davis, he does have the elite level ceiling. Hell, we saw it in that playoff game against the Kansas City Chiefs. But because I think that ceiling is so baked into his price that people are almost over accounting for it. I'm not drafting a lot of Gabriel Davis. He's like the exact opposite of the wide receiver we have next here with Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks, very comparable to Darnell Mooney, a wide receiver that should have an incredibly high floor, like a 25% team target share player, very similar to DK Metcalf as well. These wide receivers should have such a high floor in their offenses. The issue is, I'm not a believer in Davis Mills. I think Davis Mills, while everybody wants to come out here and say that he is undervalued, he is a sleeper. Everybody's saying that. I'm just going to be honest with you. I think Davis Mills is a bad NFL quarterback. I think Las Vegas has this as the worst team in the NFL. Even if Brandon Cooks gets to a 25% team target share, I think he doesn't ever finish higher than like the wide receiver 20. I don't think he has any upside at all to be that elite level player. So usually a player like this is someone I'm avoiding. Like if we're looking at Underdog Fantasy right now, he's being drafted at the beginning of the 5th. Like you have to take him before guys like Patrick Mahomes and George Kittle. So I'm never drafting Brandon Cooks. And then our last wide receiver on this list is going to end up being Amari Cooper. Now with Amari Cooper, it is very difficult for me to go through and tell you to draft him because if you're playing in that casual format where you should be able to go through and you should be able to make trades throughout the season, you're probably going to be presented with the opportunity to buy low on Amari Cooper by the time we get to weeks 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, because we know that this will be some of the worst quarterback play in the NFL. He's going to be in a very comparable situation to a Brandon Cooks, to a DK Metcalf, to a Darnell Mooney through the first half of the season. The difference with Amari Cooper is for that fantasy football playoff stretch. Hate to say this, but I do think that Deshaun Watson's still a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, possibly top 5 quarterback in the NFL. You will insert that elite level quarterback then. I think Amari Cooper can help you when it really does matter through the final month of the season. So if you're playing in a league where you know you're going to be able to make trades very often, you probably just go through, pass on Amari Cooper, buy him on the cheap about a month or two into the year. But if you're playing in a league where trades aren't going to be an option for you, maybe you take Amari Cooper, use him as a flex, use him as just a player on your bench, and then hope that he breaks out with Deshaun Watson near the end of the season. Now, that's all I got for you. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please go down there, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. We're trying to hit 90,000 subscribers before the season starts. And I think that's all I got. I appreciate you. I hope that we get to see you out with the live stream tonight. And of course, if you want to draft with us on that live stream tonight, or maybe you just want to draft in a public lobby, draft with your friends in some best ball leagues so there's no time commitment at all during the season, go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. You can find the link in the description. You can find the link in the comment section. Use promo code FLOCK when you sign up so you get our draft guide with a $10 deposit. You get our rankings and you get a 100% deposit match. But thank you again. I appreciate all of you. I hope you have a great day, and I hope I get to draft with you tonight.